Ever notice how the soundtrack of Britain has changed? The whir of milk floats, the sharp blast of a train whistle, the BBC ident before the news. Sounds everyone once knew. They've slipped away, but hearing them again brings it all rushing back. If you grew up in Britain during the mid-20th century, mornings often started with the sound of the milk float. It wasn't loud, it didn't roar like a lorry. It had this gentle electric whir that carried down quiet streets. For a lot of people, it was a kind of alarm clock, humming past the houses just as the day was beginning. You'd hear the rattle of bottles, the clink of glass against glass, and sometimes the soft thud as a crate touched the pavement. The float itself was distinctive, small, boxy, and usually painted in plain colors, with the dairy's name on the side. It ran on batteries, which made it one of the earliest examples of electric vehicles in everyday use. That slow, steady pace wasn't a flaw. It was perfect for stopping house by house. Children would sometimes race alongside it, because you could actually keep up with a milk float for a while before it pulled ahead. There was a whole routine around the delivery. Empty bottles were left on the doorstep, rinsed out the night before, and swapped for fresh ones in the morning. Families didn't just get milk either. Floats often carried eggs, butter, even orange juice. So the delivery covered half your breakfast before you'd even opened the fridge. What people remember most, though, is the soundscape it created. That quiet hum, the clinking bottles, the occasional greeting between the milkman and early rising neighbors. It was so ordinary that nobody paid it much attention, until it disappeared. Supermarkets, plastic cartons, and changing routines all chipped away at the tradition. But for decades, the milk float was a familiar companion at dawn. Hearing one again today is like unlocking a memory you didn't realize was still there. Another sound that once threaded through British life was the train whistle. It wasn't just a sharp blast of steam, it carried a weight to it. Early in the morning or late at night, you'd hear that echo drifting across towns and villages, a reminder that trains were still running, even if you weren't the one traveling. For people who lived near the railway, it became part of the background. You could tell the time of day by when the whistles sounded, the same way others might use a church clock. The whistle itself served a purpose, of course. Drivers used it as a warning, approaching a crossing, leaving a station, or signaling along the line. But beyond its function, it had an atmosphere. There was something almost mournful about the way it lingered, especially in the days of steam. Children would stop and listen as the sound faded, imagining where the train was headed. Maybe to the coast, maybe up north, maybe somewhere they'd never been. By the 1960s and 70s, as diesel and electric trains took over, the tone of the whistles changed. Sharper, cleaner, less drawn out. They did the job, but they didn't quite have that same haunting quality. Even so, the sound of a whistle cutting through the air was part of every journey. Standing on a platform, waiting with your ticket in hand, that blast signaled it was time to climb aboard. For many, hearing a train whistle again today sparks instant nostalgia. It brings back long trips with family, waving from the platform, or simply lying in bed at night as the sound carried across fields. Like the milk float, it was ordinary once, but now it feels like a lost soundtrack to another Britain. It's funny, really. Train whistles belong to the outside world, cutting through the air and reaching you whether you wanted them or not. But some of the sounds people remember most vividly came from right inside the home. Switch on the television in the 60s or 70s, and you'd be greeted by those unmistakable BBC idents. They weren't over the top. No 3D graphics, No swooshing animations, just a steady tone, a spinning globe, maybe a short burst of calm music. But they carried weight. The ident before the news, for example, had this quiet authority. Families would stop talking, kids would glance at the screen, because everyone knew something important was about to start. And then there was the test card, that still image with the girl, the clown, and the piercing tone that seemed to hang in the air. It filled living rooms late at night when the day's programming ended, or early in the morning before it began again. Annoying at times, but unforgettable. What made those sounds stick wasn't their complexity, but the routine around them. You couldn't escape them. They were the gateway into every program. Hearing one today drops people straight back into their living rooms. The curtains drawn, the glow of the set, maybe the smell of dinner still hanging around. For something so brief, those idents etched themselves deep into the memory of British life. After the television flicked off and the idents faded away, life outside the house had its own soundtrack too. One of the most distinctive came from the red telephone boxes that dotted every high street, every village green, and the corner of most city streets. The sound wasn't just the ring of the phone itself, it was the whole little performance that went with using one. Step inside, and you'd hear the heavy door slam shut behind you, muting the noise from the street. The coins clinked as you dropped them into the slot, followed by that sharp mechanical click as you pressed the buttons or turned the dial. And then the ringing tone, steady, almost impatient, before a voice finally answered. For passers-by, you'd often hear the muffled echo of someone's conversation bleeding through the glass panels, half private, but never fully hidden. The design made them instantly recognizable, but it was the sounds that made them part of everyday life. Children remember waiting outside while a parent made a call, listening to the faint hum of voices inside. Teenagers used them to call friends late at night, sometimes with a pocket full of coppers to stretch out the minutes. And for many families without a home phone, the box was the only link to relatives, to emergencies, to news. Today, they're mostly empty. Some converted into tiny libraries or repurposed for decoration. But for decades, that familiar ring and the rattle of coins inside a red telephone box were as much a part of British streets as the buses passing by. Hearing it again is like unlocking a memory of waiting outside in the rain, pockets jingling with loose change, hoping you had just enough for the call. What makes these memories powerful isn't just each sound on its own, but the way they all layered together. Early mornings might start with the hum of the milk float rolling past your street, bottles clinking while you pulled the curtains open. Later in the day, a distant train whistle might carry across rooftops, mingling with the noise of buses rumbling down the road. Evenings brought a different rhythm, the BBC ident chiming in as the family gathered round the set, while outside, the muffled ring of a telephone box cut through the quiet. It's easy to forget that Britain once had its own background music. Not designed, not manufactured, just ordinary life, producing a soundtrack that was instantly recognizable. Every neighborhood had its mix. Maybe the roar of a factory siren at shift change, maybe the church bells on a Sunday morning, or the faint echo of voices carrying from the pub at closing time. The sounds varied, but together they gave a shape to daily life. Most of those noises have faded. Supermarket milk replaced the float, phones slipped into our pockets, trains grew quieter, and the BBC idents gave way to slick digital graphics. Progress, yes, but it left gaps in the soundscape we didn't notice until they were gone. Hearing them now brings back more than the noise itself. It brings back the feeling of those moments. The stillness of a street at dawn, the anticipation of a train setting off, the hush before the news, the nervous wait outside a phone box. Those sounds marked the passing of time. They were little anchors in the routine of British life, the kind of everyday music you only notice once it's gone. And together, they stitched a kind of everyday music that still lingers in memory.